Scalona here. So excited it is Friday. We have made it. God is good. I'm excited, not just because it is the weekend, but because I have a special video for you guys. I got to have my first guest speaker on the channel, and she is great. She was able to share her story and her journey with the Lord, and it has been amazing in her ups and downs. There was a lot that was covered, so this will actually be a two-part series. I wanted to make sure that I was able to capture everything she spoke about because it was very important, and she covered a lot of serious and heavy topics. With that being said, I do want to forewarn everybody that there is discussions of drug, alcohol, anxiety, and depression. So just a forewarning for everybody that these next two parts I'm releasing this Friday and next Friday will be covering that. With that being said, here's part one.
Hey everyone, my name is Nicelle, nickname is Nikki. You can call me both, either one, I respond to it all. So grateful to be here with you guys and to share my testimony. I hope that you get something from it that inspires you, makes you feel like it's never too late to come back to God and that He's always with you. So enjoy.
First of all, thank you for being here. So again, I do want you to talk a little bit about your past and what that's been like, the ups, the downs. We all have it. I mean, us all being Christians, we know what that's like.
Yeah.
Like, there's no straight path. So I really want to talk about that, and I want you to go into as much as you're willing of your past and your childhood, your upbringing, where you found yourself, kind of falling off, and then how you came back. So I guess to start with, what was your childhood like, and being raised in the church?
So I grew up, I spent my first, from preschool through 8th grade in a private Episcopalian school, which is, borderline Catholic, and so I was raised with God, but I was raised with a fear of God. There was always this understanding that God loved you, but you had to be perfect. You better read the Bible every day, be in chapel on Wednesday, in church on Sunday, and I did it all. I was in the church choir for 8 years. I thought I knew God, I loved God, but God to me was also this very big being. He was, a 2,000-page book that I somehow had to get through, and I struggled a lot too because, being in a private school and being in a Christian school, I think there's this idea that kids are somehow nicer to you, that everybody's going to be good Catholic boys and girls, and that's not always the case. And so, I found myself surrounded sometimes by a lot of kind of hate coming towards me. I was not a cute little girl. I was not that girl that a lot of people would say, oh, she's pretty. I was the nice one. I was the funny one. And because I wasn't accepted by a lot of the kids around me, it also made me feel like maybe I wasn't accepted by God. If these kids are Catholic and good girls and boys alike, and they don't like me, then how does God like me? And so I struggled with never being good enough in the eyes of my peers, but then also maybe never being good enough in the eyes of God. And so I kind of feared God, and I would tell myself, no, I love God and He's great, but it was just kind of words. There wasn't a lot of help behind it because I just, like I say, never felt good enough for God.
Right. And there's a lot in there, and I really wanted to say, first of all, I think so many people think that when you say you're Christian, it means you go to church every single day, you read this Bible front to back multiple times a year, and you go to church, you go to private school, like all these things that you have to do, and that's what it means to be a good Christian. And I think we've talked about it a lot, in our Bible study, that yes, reading the Bible is important, yes, going to church is important, but what I think a lot of people miss in being a Christian, it is also your relationship. And I think that is number one, because you can read this Bible as much as you want, but do you comprehend it if you don't have a relationship with Him? And that's something I know we've talked about a lot. I'm happy you brought that up because I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have of, I can't be a good Christian because I don't want to do these things, or I don't know how. And then, also when you start out, like, of course, I'm still pretty much a baby and I'm still learning a lot, but you start to see how God starts changing your heart. And before you know it, the things that you're like, I don't have time for, or like, I don't want to cut this time out, like you start to realize that you start devoting more and more of your time to Him. So I really like that you picked up on that. And then you also talked on something that's really hard, and I really would love for you to kind of talk about and elaborate on how did you get through that hurdle? Because I know there's a lot of people that are out there that have also experienced it, myself, you know, as well, of how do I know God loves me when I'm not even accepted by the people around me? So like, how did you navigate that, and how did you get through that?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, it's been a long journey, and I struggled a lot with depression as a kid. You know, I struggled because, like I said, I was made fun of horribly a lot of times. I remember being in school one time at lunch, and a girl threatening to kill me because she just didn't like me, you know, and so I hated myself, to be honest with you. I had a really deep self-hate, and I think the more I grew in that self-hate and that disliking of myself, because I didn't like the way I looked, I talked funny to kids because I had an accent that no one else had. That pulled me even farther away from God, because I kept thinking, you know, if God loved me, why wouldn't he make me happy? You know, why wouldn't he make me pretty like the other girls? You know, why would I have braces and glasses and acne and all of these things that were leading to me to be made fun of by my peers? And so I was very good at that point at putting up a front. You know, I said what I had to say. I went to, you know, youth group after church, and I would talk to the pastor and say, oh, I want to be a nun, and I want to go to church. And I said all the things I needed to say because I thought if I said it somehow, it would make me more acceptable to my peers. And honestly, it just made them make fun of me even more. And so the more that happened, the more I was like, okay, obviously me admitting that I love God or speaking about God, that doesn't win. So I'm just going to not talk about God at all. I'm going to just say that God's the angry guy in the sky, and I'm going to not be that Jesus freak, and even I'm just going to stay away from God in every way. I'll say what you need me to say, but in reality, I'm going to go home and probably cry myself to sleep tonight. So there was a lot, and it took a long time. I mean, it took up until my adulthood to finally, and we'll kind of go through, and I'm sure even more in this interview, of the steps that and the things that happened, but it wasn't that there was this moment all of a sudden where I was like, and God loves me. Like, there just wasn't this time. No, it never happened. I wanted to be away from God, to be honest with you. Yeah.
And that makes sense. I get that. I've struggled with feeling the lack of feeling enough, right? And I'm starting to realize that a lot of Christians actually struggled with that. And I think really finding the Lord in your relationship with God really helps with that. And I never really understood that those kind of go hand in hand.
They do.
So, and you've talked about, you got to the point where you just want to stop talking about God, and you're like, I'm going to be done. Is that what led to your falling away? Or at what point, and I mean, maybe you wouldn't even call it that, but like, at what point did you recognize that was happening in your life?
Well, you know, I still remember when I laugh about it, you know, because I'm in an Episcopalian school, big sex ed class that you have in middle school, you know, and it was led by the pastor, and of course he came in and he said, you know, to be a good Christian and to be a good follower, you have to wait till marriage to have sex. And if you have sex before marriage, then God's going to be mad at you and you're going to go to hell. And of course everyone's like, okay. When in middle school, we don't even really know what you're talking about as much. But then when I lost my virginity in high school, I remember that kind of spoke this like, oh, well, if that's the case, and I've already had sex now in high school, obviously then that's it. You know, at this point now, I'm going to hell. So I can't really do anything else. Anything else I do at this point, like, what difference is it going to make? My fate is already decided for me. And I think that kind of became this turning point. You know, it was that one decision to just kind of not stick to that path, but then at the same time, I wasn't even on the path. You know, even in high school and all of those things, I was that believer who, when I was having a really bad day, or if I had to fly on a plane, I believed in God. God, don't let this plane crash. I believe in you. I love you. But then every other day of the week, I wasn't going to talk about him. And then when I had sex before marriage, it was kind of like, well, I wasn't really fully committed to him anyways. And I don't know if he was really making anything better for me at this point, because I couldn't see the miracles he was working, to be honest with you. You know, I was so caught up in, I think, what a lot of people go through, especially at that age of just, you know, I just need to survive. Like, just get me through high school, just get me through these next 4 years. And I just wanted to be cool. I was so used to not being liked and not being popular that I was willing to compromise my faith in order to be someone that people liked. And I figured if I had sex in high school and I became that person, well, then people were going to like me, because maybe that made me the cool kid or the edgy kid, and and I figured that was better than being alone. That was better than being the loser who would have lunch in the French classroom because I didn't have friends to eat with, and I would do those things. And that just kind of set the trajectory for the rest of it, because then when I got on my own, then I really didn't have any checks and balances because, my mom, who was a devout believer, an amazing woman, and a woman of God, there was nobody to go to. And even then, I didn't really want to go to them anyways because I knew what I was doing was wrong. Like, there was no mistake in my mind that the life I was leading was not a good one, but I'd rather not turn to the people to get help because I really didn't want them to tell me what I already knew. Like, I'd rather just kind of live in the shame of it than have to have someone tell me it's time to change, because I didn't want to change. I wasn't ready to make the changes. And that just set the path into, I guess we were going to go with this interview.
No, I mean, I think this is like perfect. I really appreciate you opening up and being honest about it. And I think it's hard, right? This is where so many people don't want to talk about this stuff. This is the part of our lives that as Christians, like, we want to say and forget that didn't happen. But a huge reason why I wanted you here today was because, just like I have shared, that God does things through us, and He changes us, and He brings us through things for a reason. He doesn't just do it just to do it, and it's not just for you. I truly believe that God does this because He wants you to use that testimony. He wants you to spread the word to others. And you talked about something that I know so many people are struggling with, and that is to be accepted, right? And it's a human desire to be accepted, to be wanted, to be included. And it's so hard to break away, and even myself included to this day, and I know we've talked about this in Bible study, is that how do you recognize that it doesn't matter? Like, earthly things don't matter. Being accepted here on earth doesn't matter.
And while you're accepted by God, you can't see God. Like, you talk to God, but, and I think that was my thing too, is I go to church, or I talk to, people who'd been in the Bible for a long time. I say, well, God talked to me, and He spoke to me. And you read books, and you read it, and it sounds like God is actually having this conversation with the person. Like, there's this audible voice, and I'm like, well, I don't hear God. Like, what do you mean God talks to you? Like, well, God doesn't ever talk to me. And so, why am I striving to be accepted by somebody who I can't see? I don't think I can really hear. And I feel like He's definitely not in my life right now because nobody likes me except when I do things I probably shouldn't do. And so I'd rather have this connection because I see you. You're in my life and face all the time, so you're more important to me than He is. And that was kind of, that started in high school and just in my younger years, and then that led me into college to kind of keeping on that path because, the physical connection was more important to me than the spiritual connection.
No, and I get that. I think that's a huge struggle. And I think that is when it's so easy, and you've said this before, to do that like slight deviation. And I'll ask you to kind of talk about that, especially like your college years, like as you started out, slight here, like how did you, continue? And if you don't mind like elaborating on that, like how that kind of like spiraled you down, I guess, into like the bigger aspect
so, of it. Went to college. Still was in this place where I didn't love myself. I hated myself. I didn't like the person I saw. I didn't like the thoughts that were going on in my head. But then I got to college, and all of a sudden, I wasn't fat anymore. I was kind of skinnier. I wasn't, my acne was kind of gone. My braces were gone. All the things that people made fun of me for, they weren't there. My accent that people used to make fun of me for, all of a sudden got me attention from guys. All of a sudden was really cute. And it was funny, and people wanted to hang out with me, and I liked that attention. I liked all of a sudden that I was getting attention that I never had before. And then I started, to be honest, I don't even know what prompted me to start smoking cigarettes. I couldn't even tell you the day it happened, but I think it was probably in culinary school, because if anybody's in food and beverage or hospitality, there's a lot of smoking, it's a lot of hours, and so when I went to culinary school, if I wanted to talk to my chef, I had to go into the smoking area. And so everybody's smoking, but I'm like, it's just a cigarette. Like, not a big deal. Everybody smokes, right? When you meet, and I knew Christians who smoked. I'm like, not a big deal. I just smoke cigarettes. And so I started smoking cigarettes. And then I got into a crowd that, they were getting good grades in school, but then, they follow this mentality of you work hard, you play hard. And so we go to culinary school all day, and then we get off, and then we hit the clubs. But you couldn't just go to the clubs, you had to drink. And you couldn't just drink, you had to do drugs. And before I knew it, I started, doing cocaine and ecstasy, and it became something where you couldn't go to the club sober because life wasn't okay sober. And so then it was, marijuana and, all those things didn't really matter because, we're still getting good grades. I mean, I'm still going to class. I'm still achieving something, right? And, well, it's just fun, and it's just what everybody does. And again, it became something where, I was accepted. And mind you, though, I was accepted for all the wrong reasons.
Right.
And they weren't my real friends, and they didn't really care about me. They liked me because misery loves company. And I was the one who bought the drugs, and I was the one who drove the car. And I'll be very honest with you, it is a miracle, and it is by the grace of God that I'm alive today and that I'm not in jail today. Because when I think back to the times where I would be, we'd be coming back from the clubs, I would be so high on cocaine and ecstasy, but somehow I would get chosen as a designated driver. There'd be 4 of us in my car. There'd be 2 in my trunk getting high on pot. I mean, it was, and we were driving maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes back to our homes. I don't know how I got home, to be honest with you, most nights. I don't know how we got home. I don't know how we made it safe. When I look back, I can see how God was with me and protected me. How even in those darkest moments when God could have said, hey, you're on your own. You're going to crash, you're going to die, you're going to kill. He protected me, I mean, he really had me wrapped up in his arms and in his love because he knew that the path that I was on was not the path that was meant for me. But I couldn't see it. I was not in that place to be able to see what I needed to see, And I got out of college, got away from those people. I stopped using for a little while, kept smoking cigarettes because, at that point I was addicted and I was hooked. But like any addiction, people would tell you, I figured I was in control, but I still didn't love myself. So I would never do drugs again. And then of course I started working for a really big hotel, met a guy who, he was a top performer. He was always getting the good reviews and he had a good job and he owned a home, and him and I started dating, and one night we're hanging out and all of a sudden he pulls out a pipe and it's meth. And he's like, do you mind if I smoke in front of you? And I was like, yeah, it's okay. Why not? You got it under control, so I'm not, I wanted to be the one who, who didn't judge. I wanted to
go with the flow.
I wanted to go with the flow, and I didn't want to be the judgy one. I felt like a hypocrite. Like, how could I judge somebody for doing drugs when, maybe a year ago, I was, cracked out in somebody's living room on a mattress. How could I judge somebody? And so I didn't judge, but the fact of the matter is all it took was that one night. And I didn't even do it, but just being around it, being a contact high, and that was it. And that's what started off, and for the next 5 years, I just started spiraling out of control in this addiction with meth. But again, I figured I held a job, I was doing well, to me it was, I'm in control. I got this, I'm in control, I can quit when I want, I can stop when I want, it's just not the right time. Now, it's not the time, But I figured too, I'm like, but if God is really forgiving, eventually he's going to forgive me, so. And with that said, anyways, I mean, I've already screwed up more times than I can count, so I guess if I'm going to hell, I'm going to hell. And it became a joke, to be honest with you. It became something that I would sit with friends in the smoking area and we talk about, oh, I'm going to go to hell. And it was a joke. It was funny. Again, I didn't want to be that Jesus freak. I didn't want to be that girl. I didn't want to be, never wanted to go back to those days that I hated so much. I never wanted to be in a position where I had no friends, and I think I was so afraid of ever having to be that little girl who got called Shamu, that I was willing to do anything and everything to be accepted. And it was really ugly. It was a really ugly time, and I almost took pride in my ability to hide it. And I don't know how well I actually hid it, because you speak to my mom, she'll tell you when I was in those days, hugging me was like hugging a telephone pole. There was no emotion. I had gone from being her daughter, to make me emotional, who would love her. I would call my mom 1,000 times a day, like she was my best friend, and all of a sudden I had pulled away. We talked about, I had made, they were just small, they were big steps, but they weren't this huge swoop. It was like, okay, it was just going to be cigarettes, and then it was going to be just maybe some ecstasy at a club, and then maybe it's going to be just not talking about God, and God kind of is angry at me, so it's okay, and before you know it, it's like this small little steps becomes this huge loop that you've made, and in the middle, here's God telling you, I'm waiting for you, I'm waiting. No.
Yeah.
No, I'm not ready for you. No. Yeah. And I remember too, and so deep in my addiction, and I got to a point too, I knew I was slowly losing control. Like I knew that I was losing what I thought I could handle when it came to drugs. And we ended up hiring a woman who now is my best friend, who was a pastor. And I still remember my boss coming in and saying, we've hired someone new to the team. She's a pastor. She's going to join the team. And I was like, and I remember thinking, this is it. She's going to come in, Liana, and she's going to see through me. Like, she's going to see the mess that I am. She's going to see them a drug addict because God's a tattletale. And God's going to talk to her because God has conversations with everybody else but me. And he's going to tell her all my dirty secrets. And so when she sees me, either he's going to zap me with lightning or she's going to touch me and I'm going to just die. And that's going to be it. And I was so afraid to see her. We'd sit in these meetings at a table like this, and I'm sure God did it on purpose. He'd make it so that she'd want to sit right next to me, and I would have whatever paper I could. I'd make sure we had like a barrier in between us, like just add up some paper. You know, I figured if I
She won't see through me now.
She won't see through me if I have enough binders in between us. That would be like a barrier, you know. And she was from Louisiana, and she just, you know, had that southern drawl, and she was so polite. And this beautiful woman, and I tell you, she glows God. If it wasn't enough, it was like looking at her was like just this glowing of God, and it was like, really, God? Like, really? You gotta like stick somebody like it? And I got it. You know, I think that, you know, it started to be kind of where God was talking to me, and I knew in my heart that I had to make changes. So he was starting to put things in my path that were like, okay, it's time. Like, I'm putting people in your path that can help you to get to where I need you to be. You just reach out. Like, literally, she's right there. Reach out to her.
Yes.
Like, go to her. And I remember, too, like, even my boss, he had come. This is why I love sharing my testimony, because my boss, he was in AA. He'd been sober for about 10 years, and he went to meetings on Thursday. He was very open about his sobriety, and he was like, you know, if anybody ever needs help, I'm always here for them. Oh, and then I remember Pastor DC one day was talking about how she helps to minister people on the side as they walk through their journeys. And I was like, okay, no, I get it, but I'm not ready yet. Right. I will one day.
Today's not the day.
Today's not the day. And it was always, you know, there was always a reason. I was opening a brand new hotel, and it was like, God, I gotta open this hotel. I'm working like 120 hours this week. Like, I cannot. Next week we'll do it. And so it just kept pushing back. It finally got to a point where God does what he does.
Yeah.
And he's gonna wake you up, and he's gonna make sure that you can't like hide from it anymore. I remember I've been trying to get a hold of my dealer, because at this point I wasn't buying, as I say, from like your local grocery guy. I was buying from like the big guy. I was buying from the guy who was the main supplier in my area, and trying to get a hold of him and can't get a hold of him. And I'm just like, I need to get some. I was at that point where I'm like, we need to figure this out. You need to come through for me. Somebody's got it. And he's not. And the guy who had gotten me into drugs, you know, him and I had separated, but misery loves company again, so we were still in contact. And he's like, hey, you might want to stop trying to get a hold of him. He's like, you might want to look and check out the local news. And sure enough, there he was. He'd gotten busted with guns and pounds of cocaine and pounds of meth. And they had been watching his house. And mind you, I used to pick up from his house like 2, sometimes 3 times a week. And he's like, you might just want to like lay low. And so there, if that doesn't tell you that God was like keeping an eye on me, like the fact that like, again, I'm not in jail and that I wasn't on somebody's radar, given how much I was at this guy's house, is an act of God. And sure enough, like that was it. So whether I liked it or not, that was God's like, okay, like you wouldn't stop when I asked you to stop on your terms, now you're going to stop on my terms. And I'm a firm believer that God gives you these wake-up calls, but he only gives you them once. And that was my wake-up call of like, okay, something's got to change. And I remember sitting in my dad's garage, because he was out and I was house sitting for him, and I'm just like, I'm going through withdrawals and I'm a hot mess, and it's late at night, and I called up my boss, and I'm like, listen, you might decide to fire me after this. I don't really know what you're going to do. I'm like, listen, I'm an addict. I've been an addict this entire time. I've lied to you about being sober. I got lucky that they didn't have to drug test me. I need help. Like, I'm not going to get through this if I don't get help. And he's like, okay. He's like, tomorrow after work, we're going to take you to a meeting, and you need to show up, and you need to go. No excuses. And I was like, okay. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What a good boss. Seriously, what a good boss for stepping in and not caring about, like, you lied to me, but I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
And throughout your entire story, like, you can see how God is working.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because when we say God is good, like, that's what we mean. He takes care of his children, even when we're trying to be stubborn children. Because I look back even in my story and I realize, like, so many times he protected me, so many times he took care of me, so many times he made sure that nothing happened to me. And it's funny that you say you got to that point, and I call that your spiritual rock bottom. So people call, your life your rock bottom, you hit there, but I call it a spiritual rock bottom. And it's like that wake up call that God was like, you know what, I've let you go far enough. Yes, I've let you decide your life, but I'm not going to let you keep going any further. Like, I'm going to put people in your life, and I'm going to do this. And it's also like, you have to know somebody's praying. Like, somebody's trying to intercede that, because, I mean, prayer works. And you see it time and time again.
My mom, she'll tell you, she prayed so hard for me. And I mean, that's the thing too, is my mom knew I was getting high in her house. I lived with my parents. She knew that I was gone, but she loved me faithfully. And she knew that one day God was going to save me. It really is a testament to my stepdad, to my mom, to my dad for just loving me through that. It was because of her faith, and it's why I have the faith that I do now, is because she trusted. She knew that the path that I was on was out of her control. And the only way we were going to get through this is if she trusted God to pull me through it. And now I can look back before getting the job with the pastor and with my boss. I applied for another job within my hotel company, and I remember I wanted that job so bad. It was going to be a promotion, and I wanted it. I interviewed, and I didn't get it. And my boss, and that's how he found me, is because we had taken a class together, and we actually ran into each other at that interview. And he was like, "Oh, you're interviewing?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, good luck with this job here." I said, "Thanks." Well, I never got the job. And I remember being so devastated, and I remember crying over not getting this job, and I was like, why? Like, I'm so ready for this. Why am I not getting this? And then, sure enough, like 2 weeks later, he calls me out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey, we took that class together. Obviously, we ran into each other at your interview, so I know you're looking. Do you want to open this hotel with me? I think you'd be a really good fit." It was going to be a lateral move, maybe a few dollars raised, but it wasn't going to be that big jump that I thought I needed to take. But it was exactly where I needed to be. That God not maybe put on his heart to call me. I would not have been, like I said, with people who would love me through this journey. He took me to my first meeting. And the funny thing is, even though he was in Alcoholics Anonymous, he preferred NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous, because he found the people just to be more, I guess, up his alley. He said, whatever that means. And it was a huge group. There was probably about 40 of us here, and as it turned out, which was even more awesome, I guess, there were several people from my hotel who had you never know they were in NA, that you would never know they were former addicts, and they showed up. I'm like, "Oh, wait, you're a server with me. Wait, I work with you." And like, like, we've been in NA for the last 5 years. Well, I'm going to be, 2 years clean. And I was like, "Oh, like, we're going to get through this together. Like, you're going to be fine." And I just remember they make you stand up, and I was like, "I'm not standing up. Like,
I'm not doing that.
I'm not introducing myself. We can have clean. I'm not doing this." And he's like, "You're going to get your butt up. You're going to work good up." And so they go around, and they're like, "So, who's new? Who's less than 30 days clean?" And I was like, He said, "Get up." And so I stood up, and I'm like, "What am I doing here? Like, what is happening?" And then they make you get up, and then like, "Okay, then it's time for chips." I was like, "I'm not getting chip. I don't want to get chip. I don't want to get up." And they go through, and again, they do the whole process, and they're like, "Okay, who's less than 30 days clean? Come get your chip. Come get a hug." I'm like, "I'm not hugging people. Like, I don't want to hug people. I don't want to get chip." Like, I introduce myself. "You can come find me if you want to give me a hug." He said, "Get up." And so sure enough, he's like, "Anybody else?" He's like, "Right here. She didn't get a chip." And so I'm like, awesome. So I get up, I go up, and the guy is there, and he's like, "Congratulations, I'm really proud of you. You're making a really good change in your life." And he gives me my chip, and he's like, "Hug." And I was like, "Hug, awesome." Like, and I was just so used to people only liking me for something. People only liked me because I was giving them something. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I didn't pay you. I can't really give you anything. Like, it was this weird, an idea of, I'm accepted. And it was hard for me to accept being accepted for not giving you anything. And I guess I kept waiting too, are you going to ask me for something? Am I going to have to buy something? What? He's like, "No, you're just accepted." And I walked out after the meeting, and I'm sitting in my, I had a big Jeep at the time, or SUV, and I'm sitting in my trunk, and a couple of the girls come over, and I just remember crying. Like, I'm just bawling in my trunk, and they're like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm okay. They're like, yeah, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm okay. Like, for the first time in my life, I'm okay with being okay. Like, I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. Like, I'm okay. And it's like, it was like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders of just being like, okay, this is really good. This is, and she like, it's a new feeling, isn't it? I was like, yeah. Like, this is a totally new feeling. And the nice thing about NA and AA is they make you find a higher power. They make you, I shouldn't say they make you, they highly recommend that you find a sponsor, that you find a higher calling. They don't tell you who that higher power has to be. To accept that when you try to be in control of your life, obviously you mess it up, which is true, which is why I was doing drugs, because I tried to control my life and I numbed my pain with drugs. So they teach you to find a higher power and to accept there's more to this life than just you, and to be accepting of what that means in the universe and of God and of everything. And I sat there and it was just this overwhelming sense of love, of like, I can do this. I'm not going to say it was easy. I quit meth cold turkey. It was the ugliest thing I've ever gone through. It was the hardest thing I've ever gone through, physically and mentally. There was this process that I went through of finding myself. I got a sponsor who, as it turns out, was someone else I had worked with, who had been honest with me about her sobriety, and she was a woman of God. We weren't working together anymore, but I'd gone back just to say hi to everybody, and I saw her, and I'm like, so, Michelle, I gotta tell you something. She's like, what's up? And I'm like, well, I'm about 2 weeks clean. And she said, okay. I was like, listen, will you be my sponsor? Like, I need help, and I need a sponsor. And she just was like, yeah. We're going to do this. Because she was in AA, we went to AA meetings, and we went with women who were in their 50s and 60s and 70s, women who were 20 years, 30 years, some women 40 years sober, women who had walked through kids dying and suicides and husbands and divorces and everything that for most people would cause you to turn not only away from God, but to turn back to that one thing that helped you numb the pain, and they never turned away. There was this love and this acceptance, and to be honest, it took me a long time to walk into those rooms and to accept the acceptance that I was being given, to let people love on me in that way. And it's the way that God loves you. I remember Michelle telling me, let them love you. They are trying to love you as the way that God loves you. They're not asking anything from you. They're just asking you to show up and to put in the work. They're not asking you to be perfect, and that's what I love too. It was not about perfection. It was about progress. It was not about trying to make it a year or 5 years. It was about 1 minute at a time, 1 day at a time, making those small decisions that are going to help you to be a better human being. And it was like, okay, I can do that. I can do a minute at a time. I can do a day at a time. I'll be 8 years clean in October, and it's the most,
congratulations. That's awesome.
And when I find myself sometimes getting overwhelmed, I have to remind myself, no, it's 1 minute at a time. It's 1 day at a time. But it started with just being honest and people being honest with me about their testimony and their life.
Absolutely. I love that you talked about like the honesty and allowing people into your life, because I think we've talked about this, is there is power with speaking something and basically ripping that from its power, not allowing that to control you. When you to God, like it really releases the power that it has over you, and really speaking that and saying like, okay, I have a problem and I need help. It's like something about that, just you feel that like, okay, I've been honest, and it's not going to be easy, but I now have made the first step to basically take that control away from it that it has over me. And I think that is so beautiful that you can see it, like even with you, and you have such a beautiful testimony. This is why I wanted to come here and talk about it. And also, okay guys, that was the end of part 1. I'm so excited for part 2 as we wrap up Nikki's journey. Hope you guys stay tuned for next week as I go ahead and release that, and we talk more about her journey and how she was able to come back and how God was able to use her. I am so excited for this and for you guys to hear this, as she has such beautiful insight and her testimony is amazing. I hope y'all have a great weekend. You're able to break away, reconnect, recharge, and get ready for the new week. Bye guys.